Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Stages of Sound, or welcome to Stages of Sound if it's your first time. We can never make it through one of these just perfectly fine. God. My name's Jack.
Is it your first tame here? My name's Mackenzie.
I've tamed a couple, all right? It's not my first tame. My name's Jack.
The soundtrack where we don't tame lions, we tame soundtracks, and we're here to talk about them.
This isn't a soundtrack, it's a podcast, Mackenzie.
No, but we're talking about soundtracks, and in order to do that... Yeah,
but you said this is the soundtrack where we tame soundtracks. Whatever, let's just move on. This is a train wreck already, let's just get to it.
Wow, that might be the worst one yet.
We strive for lower lows every day.
Oh, man.
Today we're talking about Shovel Knight, the game that was released in 2014. I have researched all this already. Great game, one of the landmark indie games of that type of generation. I feel like that was at the very start of the resurgence of indie. Like, you have the classics like Cave Story and, the original Flash Isaac, Super Meat Boy. And then Shovel Knight came in and, codified it. You know what I mean?
I'd say Shovel Knight was kind of it's what kicked off, what indie games are now, Like, it kind of never slowed down after that point.
I would say that's a good way to describe it. It was like the first modern indie game, which almost feels like, for a game that's trying to go retro, it's a little ironic, but
Well, I mean, that's kind of the aesthetic philosophy of a lot to indie games nowadays. So, which is fine. I think
even back then, I'd say. Yeah,
and
for sure.
For Shovel Knight, that kind of just that looked like becoming Mega Man. It was just a Mega Man which is. I don't think a bad way to go about it. Like, they didn't do a whole lot to revitalize the system, but it's cool.
But
it's a guy with a shovel. It's fun.
I don't know. I like Shovel Knight more than most Mega Man games. If they want to just redo something and do it well, who am I to stop them? And that ties right into the soundtrack as well. If they want to just redo Mega Man and do it even better, who am I to stop them?
And that's
what they did here.
What's the composer's name? I can't remember. Holy crap! I feel so
Jake
bad.
Kaufmann. I didn't even have to look this up. Jake Kaufmann's a legend.
I knew his first name was Jake.
Sorry. Jake Kaufmann, the Soul composer? That's not true. They also invited the Mega Man composer on for a couple tracks as well.
That's right.
Like the original composer for Mega Man.
That.
I'll just look that up. Can you say some more stuff about the game while I do this
so
research?
Shovel Knight is a game where you're a guy and a shovel, and
That's not true.
Your friend got kidnapped by a ghost, and you're off to rescue her.
And also, the ghost is a big turtle that you got to jump through platforms to get through.
Well, now we're just getting absurd. But
and you have to capture monsters in order to fight them. So composer Jake Kaufmann and Manami Matsume, who is the Mega Man composer. They invited them on. I know the specific track that they worked on. Do we want to just hop right into it?
Sure.
Give a little special shout out. That was the Iron Whale. I don't remember exactly what the track is called, but it's the water level that they invited them on for.
Yeah.
This is a bit of a strange one to start with for sure, but it's one of my favorite area themes. It's got a very different style than the other areas, and a lot of that I feel is because of the percussion. It feels very much like this is a composer who's used to working on 8-bit sorts of games, because the percussion is super steady all throughout it. It's just
it's very Mega Man for sure.
Yes, and it never ever strays from that percussion, even as the main melody is going around like crazy. We should maybe elaborate a little more. This soundtrack is entirely chiptune, right?
Yes.
Which is different from what we've done before. The other soundtracks have had some chiptune elements, but this is exclusively that.
I will say right now for our Spotify listeners, make sure that you're listening on decent quality. I don't know if you can change it in the playback, but I do know that chiptune sometimes doesn't work very well with Spotify playback.
Oh yeah.
So if you can't hear the melody, maybe you take a look into your sound settings, see if something's up.
Yeah, if the song sounds a little more bare than usual, you're playing it on an original NES and the sound chip is getting overloaded, check out your settings.
Exactly. But anyway, yeah.
Iron Whale. You have any thoughts about it?
I will say it's probably my least favorite level to play because I don't like the water.
I mean, that's classic for video games, right? The water levels are always unfun.
I didn't like the floatiness of it. I guess because I ended up using that one armor that stops you from taking knockback, and that made my life
interesting.
bajillion times easier.
Because you don't have to float to the ground after taking damage.
And there's a lot of pits that you just kind of float down into very slowly, and there's spikes that you have to avoid jumping into. I don't know. It just wasn't my favorite. And then the boss fight is kind of lackluster. IMO.
I kind of like Treasure Knight as a boss. He sort of lunges around, even though
easy.
He is. They're all kind of easy. Let's not kid ourselves.
Right, fair enough. Well, I mean, we did just come off of talking about Hollow Knight 2 weeks ago. But...
Comparatively, there's no contest. Yeah. I think the music adds to the atmosphere, though. Like, you know, totally. You are slowed down, and it's a little bit, you know, annoying to move through even. But the music is also very, like, plodding and methodical, I guess. And that's the sort of vibe you get when you go through the level, too.
It very much feels like you're in an ocean. I have it in my head. I know what you're saying. I will say, most of my time for this one wasn't researched through listening to the OST. I was just playing the game, and some.
That was your research?
Yeah, I played through the base game. I did listen to the DLC, on the soundtracks, which I have some thoughts about. But the what was it called? The Iron Whale.
Iron Whale.
Yeah, it's great. I think it is a really just fantastic example of like a deep sea Mega Man level. You know, like it could very well fit.
That's basically exactly what it is. Yeah. It develops it even a little more than like most Mega Man levels would. Like the later sections of the song where it gets like it swells a little bit and gets not triumphant but more energetic.
Yeah,
I really really love that because, like I said, the percussion is sort of maybe the weakest point of the track to me. It's always just sort of plotting out that same rhythm the whole time.
But you do think that came from the Mega Man influence?
I really do think so. And like as the melody elaborates and elaborates further, and like it feels like it's just developing that same like it opens with those very long drawn out notes as it goes through. Yeah, when it goes into that, it's just perfect. It's beautiful. Even with the percussion being a little lackluster, I think.
Yeah, I'll just get it out of the way early. The melodic writing of Shovel Knight is bar none incredible. Like it's crazy. Like there's not a bad melody in the whole thing. They're all just. Oh, do you have a thought?
I would say, I mentioned this in the boss fight tracks. I don't love the boss fight rearrangements of them. Mm-hmm. I'd say like generally almost every area theme is like incredible melodic writing. But the boss fights, as they recontextualize the area themes, don't quite do as good of a job. I went more into detail about this in the boss fights episode.
I took what you said and I kind of thought about it while I was listening to them. Often what they do is they take like a quote from the melody of the area theme at the kind of beginning of the boss fight, like as it begins, and then they kind of just develop it from there. But it's not really, none of the boss tracks are really ever that standout compared to the area themes, save for like the final boss, maybe?
I'd say the final boss is good. And funnily enough, the boss fight that I enjoy the most, I would say, is probably the Fighting with All Our Might, which is the generic boss battle theme against like the overworld
against
bosses.
Just like the roaming enemies, sure.
Yeah, and that doesn't have an equivalent in like area themes, right?
Right.
So is that a remix of Strike the Earth? I don't think it is.
I actually can't really bring that one to mind right now. So very well.
I don't think it is. Anyway, I think it's original, and even if it is an arrangement of Strike the Earth, I feel like the way that they did it, like it's a little slower than the others. Like the boss fights in particular, like really try to like amp up the tension and excitement of the area themes, whereas this still feels comfortable being a little slower, a little more methodical.
Sure.
I feel like it works well. I don't particularly like the combat music in this game, but I feel like that one was quite good.
There is one. Okay, I'll jump into this now. I have it written down as my like favorite boss theme, but we don't need to do it as structured as we have been.
Because like that would be my favorite combat theme. We can give ourselves our favorite area themes, though. We'll go into that later.
I actually think King Knight's fight is really, really well done musically, because actually keeping in mind what you were saying, it's not as like direct a development off of Pridmore Keep as some of the others.
Pridmore Keep?
Pridmore, whatever.
Pridmore?
Yeah.
Whatever, let's move on.
Sure. Is that not how you... Okay.
It's Pridemore, like
sure.
Like the word pride. Anyway.
Yeah, okay, fine. I've lost my train of thought. It's
not as direct of a quote.
Yeah, well, unlike some of the others, it doesn't open with like the ba 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 ba, right? Like it's just like a totally different feel. So once you get into the main swing of it, it's still very clearly like it's a fast-paced melody based on like this kind of medieval-sounding theme. But the opening is really kind of astounding, I feel.
Yeah,
like it has this really cool like synth gliss thing, like it's really great.
Yeah, I'm remembering that now. Yeah, for sure.
And it's great. That's like the first boss that you really fight, so it really kind of captures you.
Well, like, it can be. You could also go to Specter Knight instead.
Did you ever? That was always the first one that I did, was King Knight.
I think my first time I went to Specter Knight first.
Really? Oh, okay.
I mean, we can go from here into Pridemore Keep and the Lich Yard. Like, those are some both phenomenal tracks to open you up with, I think.
Primal Keep, I think, was used to be my favorite area theme for sure. I definitely used to say it as my favorite.
Yeah, it's not my favorite anymore, but I still really, really love it. It feels super distinct among the soundtrack too. Like that sort of stately feeling you don't see too much in the other tracks. Like, I guess maybe in the tower approach, but that's like it should feel like that in the final area. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'm going to do this out of order a little bit. I want to talk about the Specter of Torment soundtrack later on.
I was intending to have us go for
later
like
on in the episode.
Second section.
I think just so that the listeners can hear the tracks back to back. You've been listening to Pridemore Keep, everybody. A very nice kind of intro level. It's very kind of menacing, very medieval. And then you go to the Specter Knight soundtrack, which is pretty cool because it remixes all the area themes and all the boss themes. It's very cool. It's very nice what they've done with the soundtrack.
I'm bracing for impact.
This is the Pridemore Keep theme in the Specter Knight playthrough. What do you think?
I'm just gonna let that sit for a second.
What do you think of it?
It brings me so much pain. So much pain. Why would they do this? Like, yes,
I get it.
I'll give it to Jake Kaufmann. It's a clever reorchestration. You turn Pridemore Keep into a major key, makes it feel super upbeat and confident. I have to ask why.
I do wonder, because my hatred for it has always come from comparing it to the base game version. I do wonder if it was standalone, would it be? I don't think I would like love it or anything. I think it would just kind of be whatever.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Compared to the original Pridemore Keep,
it sets a very interesting tone.
Yeah. Anyway,
this is just pure pain. We're gonna come back to Specter Knight, but we gotta get that out of the way. It doesn't taint the rest of Specter Knight.
Throw it out of the episode. It's gone forever. All right.
Okay, we're back. Pridemore Keep, regular Pridemore Keep, great song, phenomenal song, suits the area really well, and is one of the few songs that gets developed in an interesting way for the boss. Although I guess that's maybe less of the fact that it gets developed interestingly, and more that King Knight just sort of does his own thing.
I would say, like, I'd have to listen to it again to, like, really analyze to see if there's... Because I think, of course, there are references to the melodies of Pridemore Keep in the boss theme, but I think it was done in a cooler way than some of the other ones, and maybe a bit more of a... I don't want to say inspired, but, like, it sounds...
I'm hearing it in my head, and like the way it like picks up the, it feels like it's in 6/8 tempo again, doesn't it? Like to pick up the pace a little more. It's going in interesting rhythmic iterations, regardless.
I don't think it is, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I can hear it in my head, which is I can't hear most of these by will in my head when I think of these. The boss fights in particular.
The boss fights, that's the other thing. They're very not memorable.
I think especially in contrast to the area theme they come from.
The only two I can really bring up in my mind is the Specter Knight fight and the first phase of the Tinker Knight fight.
Oh, well, that one's very distinct in its own way.
Yeah.
But I can't come up with the second theme of Tinker Knight for some reason. So
it kind of sucks. IMO. I would say that that area.
Did you play through the whole game when you were in preparation for this? Yeah. Wow. Okay.
It's not a very long game in the grand scheme of things.
No, you could beat it probably in like 5 hours. Yeah.
Well, there's an achievement for beating it in an hour and a half, which is, and they set that to be kind of like achievable. You know.
Ah, I see.
So it takes like effort and like you gotta get kind of good to do that. But the Tinker Knight kind of area theme is also not really my favorite. It's kind of just
really?
It's kind of just noisy. I feel
I ranked all of my the area themes. I don't know if you want to do that as well, but we can run through them. Just to spoil that, Clockwork Tower is probably my third favorite area theme. I really
maybe I didn't give it enough of a shot, honestly.
I mean, you're right that it is busy, and then it goes through a lot of like it has a lot of metallic screeching sounds in the background as it goes. But I think, first off, I think that it really fits the aesthetic. I think it works really well in-game for it. But also, like, when the melody starts building up around it, and like, those metallic sounds, those clinks and clangs and screeches start to, like, fill in with the melody that pops up, it's really, really beautiful. Like, it was sort of a surprising hit for me, because I didn't remember it being this good before, but as I was re-listening to it here, I was really impressed with what they did with all of that, personally.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I mean, maybe when I was just playing through it, I didn't pick up on that. Maybe it's something you notice more when you're listening more intently to the soundtrack.
But also,
that level just makes me kind of mad. I don't know.
It's hard to separate that sometimes. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, when I don't think I've ranked them really, but like when I consider these area themes, I consider mostly the melody is what comes to mind. Like I think that's really the strong suit of this whole soundtrack is like the melodic writing. It's all really, really good.
Yes.
I just can't seem to remember Clockwork Tower that well. So.
Oh, it comes into my head super easily. So I don't know what that says about it. Maybe it's just an acquired taste, or I'm a big fan, in particular, of both the instrumentation, creativity, and the melody of Clockwork Tower. I think is also very strong. So nice. I think we'll have to agree to disagree here.
I'll give you that. I'm not like strongly opposed by any means.
Did you say that was your least favorite overall
of the area?
Because I have a particular shout out.
I know you don't. I know you don't like the Polar Night one. I do kind of like it.
Stranded Ship to me, especially. We're talking about how all of these songs have super strong melodic writing. Stranded Ship feels like the big exception to that. It feels just sort of meandering the whole time. Like it never really feels particularly tense. The melody never picks up in any direction at all. It just sort of keeps on going. And like I said before in the boss battles episode, that does sort of lend to Polar Knight's fight having a little more, tension involved with it, which I kind of appreciate.
You kind of shouted that one out as being maybe a better boss theme than an area theme, which I kind of feel. Like, I think it works maybe for like a Viking shipyard, sure. I don't know, like it's definitely an oddball when you consider it with the rest of the area themes. It doesn't really have the same kind of energy.
It might be that like the others are just so beautifully composed melodically, especially, that this one in particular stands out for being weaker in that regard. You know what I mean? Like if the rest of the songs hadn't been quite so insanely strong melodically, maybe I wouldn't care as much. But it does feel like the weak link.
I'm trying to bring up the melodies of it, and it's not coming up. But I do remember the instrumentation.
And then it just sort of dissolves in my head.
But I do remember the instrumentation, and I remember kind of like the rock band kind of feel with like the guitar at the beginning. I feel overall, it for sure. But
what they do with the chiptune in this game is overall very, very creative. Like I heard some critiques when the game first came out. What is it? 9 years ago? That like they didn't stick hard enough to the full 8-bit sound library, and that like they start to veer out of it a little bit sometimes. What do I care about that? Authenticity isn't what I'm coming here for.
They're like, man, it doesn't sound like this was on an NES. Like, bro, have you played the game? They couldn't have made this on an NES.
Yeah, exactly. I enjoy having the melody not cut out when I jump. You know what I mean?
God, if they like fully made it with like Family Tracker and made it so that like you only had the 8 bits of storage, like no, that wouldn't be.
Some people genuinely complained about that back then.
I think that would genuinely just be a downgrade to the soundtrack for sure.
It probably wouldn't ruin it, but it would be a downgrade.
No, I mean, like there are obviously great soundtracks from the NES era. I just think they would be better if they didn't cut out when you made another noise. You know.
Having recently played Mario 3, I think we both agree with this.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep. In regards to just sort of following up on, we're on area themes. Ones that didn't impress me with the melody quite as much. This is one that actually has dropped significantly in my own personal ranking. The Lost City. I do really like The Lost City.
That one's like in my top 3, I'd say.
Yeah, it like I really, really love the intro, especially like that bum 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 bum.
Yeah, I think as it goes on, it gets a lot worse. That's true.
It does, yeah, and that's the thing that stuck out to me is like those first like 20-30 seconds are phenomenal, and if they kept that tone all throughout, then it might have been in my favorite tracks. And while that was the only thing I remembered, it was in my favorite tracks. But as I gave it more of a critical listen, I realized like they don't develop it in a very exciting way. They don't keep that tone. They sort of go more wishy-washy, which was the issue I had with Stranded Ship as well.
I feel like the beginning of Lost City, going back to the Mega Man like analogy, starts as a track that isn't so Mega Man-y, you know? But then as it goes into the main body of the piece and into the main melody, it does kind of continue a lot of those kind of ideas and references, but like, or influences, I should say. But
I understand what you mean.
The other tracks do that too, but they might be a little bit more overt about it.
And interesting. I don't know. I don't hate what the Lost City does, and like I still have it. It's only my 4th least favorite, which is already like it's well above Stranded Ship, for example. There's a lot of things about it that I really do enjoy. But it has fallen a little bit, and part of that is just that it doesn't get developed quite as much as I would like. It doesn't have that same strong, constant melodic writing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fair. So you said you ranked it, right? I think I have a pretty solid top 3.
Okay, so I can run through my top 3 as well. I'll start from the third then. This is what I'm fairly sure will be in your top 3 as well.
Sure.
Flying Machine.
Oh, it wasn't. It wasn't, but yeah, it's close.
Wait, hang on. Clockwork Tower was actually my third. I've already gone through that. I misread my own list.
Is Flying Machine second?
Flying Machine is my second pick. Okay. I really, really love Flying Machine.
It's great. I think the opening is really, really cool.
Oh, absolutely. Like
they don't launch you into the track. It's
else.
like it feels almost distant. You know, it kind of starts with these like kind of like meandering synths in the background, then it like jumps into the main body of the track.
Yeah,
it's really cool. And it kind of mirrors what you do in the level.
An armada of airships.
Exactly. Right, because you start on the ground, you jump up on the jellyfish, and then jump onto the ship. So kind of like you approach it. I don't know. That's true.
And yet, all throughout that piece, it never like backs down from that free-spirited, flighty feeling. You know what I mean? It's so perfect for a level that's themed entirely around being above the clouds. Like I think the song is called High Above the Clouds. It fits perfectly. And fun fact, what I've heard about this song is that supposedly Jake Kaufmann composed it in an hour.
That's
like
awesome.
At the very end of the crunch deadline. Like he just like scrambled to throw it together, and somehow he nailed it perfectly. Like I wish I could work that well under a deadline.
That's so cool.
Mm-hmm. So you said that this would be like among your favorites, but not quite.
Yeah,
in your top
probably
3?
like 4 or 5. Maybe it is my third favorite. Oh shoot. No, I did say Lost.
If you put it as your third?
Well, my third was Lost City. I feel like you've kind of convinced me a little bit just because of the midsection of it.
Yeah, if Lost City had continued that first part, like, and that really strong driving feeling throughout it, it would be higher up for me. But the consistency and the beautiful nature of Flying Machine really elevates it for me.
You know what? Okay, Flying Machine I think is still my fourth because my third is Explodatorium. I think yeah, it's definitely not one that I would choose to listen to over and over again, but what it does really well is capture the setting, you know?
Yeah,
like it's very clearly this like mad scientist's lab. It uses this it's hard to describe, but parallel major thirds is what it does. And for some reason, like you'd think major third, oh, it sounds happy and bright. It's very kind of when they're
frantic,
moved in parallel,
manic,
like it's hard to describe without like actually demonstrating it on a piano, but it's
well, you guys can all hear this when it's playing anyway.
You can,
like,
so it's
you can hear the frantic manic nature.
That bit, it's in parallel major thirds, so it's interesting just how it's composed that way, but it does a great job, and the melody itself is like spooky, but not in like a ghostly way. It's spooky in like a Frankenstein, like
yeah,
way,
and
you know?
you get it's exactly what you'd think of when you think of like a mad scientist theme. You know what I mean?
For sure,
it fits perfectly for that. What I love about that track is how like the melody, the beats of the melody. Melody might not be the right term because the melody's like that.
There are a few melodic pieces in that one. It's kind of frantic, really. Like
yeah, it is. It goes through a lot of different emotions, but the first part, at least, how it never drops quite on the one. It always drops on like the offbeat after. Like every single melodic beat until you get into the further stages is sort of off kilter and uneven, which
it's really built on offbeats
super
for sure.
Well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which I really appreciate. I think it's not in my top 3. It's actually a little below the bottom of the list. I wouldn't say that's an indictment of the track, though. I'd say that's more showing just how strong the soundtrack is overall.
And we did approach the soundtrack in different ways. You approached it from listening to it. I approached it from playing the game.
Yeah,
right,
and that would naturally make you lean more towards what fits in the game, which I don't blame you for at all.
So that was our third. You've already said your second.
Yeah, my second is Flying Machine, and my third was Clockwork Tower.
Sure.
So your third was Explodatorium, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
I guess
what's your second?
My second is Lichyard.
Lichyard. Perfect.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, we are like working our way through every single one of the songs in a natural way, despite the fact that we just jumped from one to the other.
Yeah.
We still haven't really reported too much. Yeah, Lichyard is so good.
I mean, what really blew me away about it was just its melody. Like, I think the second portion of the melody, there's this bit that's like da 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 dee da da da. It always it's hard to explain, obviously. Like when you're talking about music, you kind of just have to mimic it. But like it's something about the way that melody is structured just blew me away the first time I listened to it, and it still hits so good every time.
Yeah, the rhythmic elements of it for sure work really, really well. They're creative, you know. They could have gone with a more generic feel to it, but they really went out of the way.
It's not like a menacing track by most standards. Like
for what it is, for being
a graveyard, but it's not like spooky in that way, you know?
Yeah,
it's great.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
It's like it's jamming more than it is, spooky and menacing, which
that's
is an
maybe the
interesting way to
case
approach
with
that.
all of the tracks. Like, none of them are low energy, really.
Besides maybe Lost City, but
even when you get into the
agree.
melody of Lost City,
it starts to pick up
gets
more.
kind of jumping. Yeah.
Which might be my problem with it, but I still do really like the track. Lichyard is phenomenal, and that's another song that I don't hate when it transitions into the Specter Knight boss fight. I think they do a pretty decent job with it.
Specter Knight, probably one of my favorite boss tracks in this one. I think it's really well done.
And that's not necessarily saying a lot for me, because I've expressed my distaste for the formula, but they did it just fine here. And like I was saying before, for Lichyard and Pridemore Keep to be the first two songs, well, not the first two songs, we'll get to that, but being the first two, night level themes you hear, to really set the stage for, this is the theming that's going to be around these, they are perfect.
Yeah, this is the standard, this is what you're listening for.
They're both beautiful. I love them both. I would agree, though, that Lichyard is probably a little better than Pridemore Keep.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Pridemore for me is probably, middle of the list for me now.
It's about middle of the list for me as well, yeah.
All right, Jack.
Okay. My favorite area theme, this might be cheating. I considered disqualifying it, but I will include it, is Plains of Passage. Plains of Passage is
Wait, is that the first area?
It's the first level theme.
That's mine, too.
Okay, great minds think alike. I mean, I don't think we need to change up our list for this.
No.
We can both agree.
I think the fact that we both agree, it's so good.
It's funny. We're keeping our streak of agreeing on topics like this.
Yeah. So, I mean, what made me kind of consider it my favorite was the fact that the melodic structure of it is almost all based on the Shield Knight motif, which I think is so cool.
Yeah, and you could argue that instead the Shield Knight motif is sort of based on this, because this is what you hear first, but
I hear the Shield
Knight
motif first when you're in the cutscene in the tower. It happens a little bit first.
Cutscene. Oh, the very first opening cutscene? Yeah, okay, fair enough.
But neither of those...
And the Shield Knight motif is
Yeah. I would say the way that you sung it there is the
dream one.
Yeah, and it's also kind of just the standard, that is the melody that Shield Knight's motif is, the other bits of it are referenced from that melody.
Yeah, I mean, that's how you construct, motif-based melodies, is you cut little chunks of the main one that you've constructed apart. And that's how a lot of people do it.
So, to use that kind of motivic structure to build the melody of this first level is a great way to, launch into the adventure of going to save Shield Knight,
even the very start, the very first parts of the melody, the da-da-da-da...
That is what that is, exactly.
The Shield Knight motif. Yeah. It's so... I didn't even catch that, honestly, until you described it to me.
It's fantastic.
But now that you have, I see it everywhere. It's built on that. Wow. And, I didn't have it as my favorite for that reason at all. I had it as my favorite because
it's just a banger.
It slaps. Yeah. It's just so good. I remember, this is a deep cut. Probably 7 years ago or so. Family Jules, who is a YouTuber who does metal covers of video game songs, he did a bunch of top 10 lists of what are the best of X theme in a video game. Sort of like what we're doing with our themed episodes. And Plains of Passage was number 1. And at the time I was like, what? There's so many better first level themes in video games. I've come around to it.
Yeah.
Plains of Passage is among my favorite first level themes in any game.
It does a fantastic job.
Yeah, and I didn't even consider it's even better now in my mind that it is basically using the main theme of the game or the secondary main theme.
The theme of the person you're going to save. I have a lot to say about the Shield Knight motif.
Go for it. Now is the time.
Is now the jumping off point? Okay.
I'd say so. Yeah.
I kind of scoured the
because the Enchantress fight is based on that as well, right?
We'll get there. It definitely is.
Okay.
So first is Shield Knight's Requiem, which I'll place here in the editing, I'm sure. It's just this gorgeously written chorale. It's very.
And this is the dream.
This
theme,
is the dream. Yeah. It's just really kind of classically written. It's not intense. It's just. It's not even really that intricate. It's just. I
mean, it's basically just stating the
It's
theme,
stating
right?
the melody, harmonized in a kind of almost like a church-like way, dreamy, sure, but. It's a great way of kind of just showing you this is Shield Knight and this is the melody that represents her, right? They use, and the thing about that motif is that it's very easy to use it as a smaller building block in other things. It's 3 notes. It's da da da, right? You can use that anywhere. So
if you want to elaborate it further, then you can, but you certainly don't have to.
Yeah, and of course he does everywhere. But like in the, for example, I don't know if I'll be able to pull a snippet of this for the editing, but in the opening cutscene where it talks about like Shield Knight getting captured or whatever.
Oh yeah, they have like a very menacing and like high-strung version of that.
Yeah, just like descending and like using, I think it's like augmented or diminished chords, I can't remember, just to like kind of like show like, oh, something's not quite right, but it still uses that same melodic kind of building block.
Yeah, like what I want to say, jumping, this is a tiny bit of a tangent, but the music and in particular that theme, Shovel Knight doesn't have a great story. It's not really trying to, so I don't blame it for that.
It doesn't need to have a great story.
And yet, still, in these songs, I do feel like it gives you an emotional connection to this very simple story that it's saying. And the music is a huge part of that. And this theme, like, elaborating on it. I'll get more into this in the Plague Knight section, how it really is moving sometimes. But the music is such a big factor to that. When your game is this simple, by design, right? The music has to carry a lot of that emotional weight. And I think it does a phenomenal job in this game.
For sure. And so, like I was saying, I was kind of scouring the soundtrack for bits and pieces of this being used, and most of the time it doesn't really come up, like in area themes or whatever. Like it's just not around, like most of like the basic area themes. It doesn't even really come up in the Black Knight first fight. It comes up only as a reference to the way it's constructed in the first level. But it does come up about 20 seconds into the rematch against Black Knight.
Yes,
as like
I did notice that.
Clear like statement of that melody, kind of in a background synth, like between two larger chunks of the track itself. But it's very, very kind of deliberately placed there. And if you want to read into it, you can be like, his loyalties are actually to Shield Knight, and this is like his whole character is based on her, and it's like, yeah, okay, but like it's I don't know, it's a great way of placing that in there.
Yeah, they milk the music for the emotional benefit and that it can tie to the story as much as they can, which I think is smart. Totally. So reading into it isn't like, you're not going lore brain here. I think it's just
not too crazy.
The natural connection to make. Yeah, exactly.
The other place where it's used really cool, in a really cool way, is, of course, the Enchantress fight. The first phase, it's like not...
Wait, can we give a spoiler warning here? Spoilers for Shovel Knight.
Sure, the game came out 10 years ago, but whatever.
And well, like I said, the story's not the selling point, but still, the Enchantress is Shield Knight, who you've been trying to save this whole time, which is like...
Or she's like a demon that like possessed Shield Knight or something like that.
The amulet is actually the Enchantress.
Yeah,
yes.
But,
okay, anyway.
But the first phase of that fight, when Shield Knight still hasn't kind of broken free, the theme doesn't come up not in a very clearly stated way. I might just need to look into it a little bit deeper, but it's not as obvious.
Well, if it's not as obvious, even if it's in there and hidden, then that's like an allusion to how Shield Knight is in there somewhere, right?
Totally. I mean, and to the point that like if I couldn't pick it out on like a cursory listen, then they did the job. But then once she breaks free and helps you in the second phase against the Enchantress, it's everywhere. It's like the first level. It's the entire melody and the entire kind of structure of it is based on that motif, but not in like a sad way or a menacing way. It's all heroic and it's all climactic. It's such a well-written piece of music. Like it is definitely within like my top 3 or 4 boss tracks, but in this game. But it's just
I mean, personally, I don't feel like the competition. I don't think the competition is that stiff. So I would go like Fighting with All Our Might #1, the Black Knight rematch #2, and then the final battle #3. Personally, But like I said, those are and it should be noted, those are pretty much the original boss tracks. Yeah. So it sort of makes sense that those are the ones I prefer the most.
Yeah, but I mean, the fight against the Enchantress, like, it's stated in the main theme of the phase 2, but it's also like ricocheting everywhere as like the after effects of the melody. So it's like the melody itself, and then it's like da 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 da. It's like everywhere. It's super cool.
And that's, it fits super well for Shield Knight actually being there. Like, now that she's a presence beside you, you're hearing her theme everywhere throughout this song.
Yeah, it's not something that you're trying to get to. It's something that's actively working alongside you. It's just like a really, really great example of like motivic writing in a soundtrack. It's really cool.
Yeah. What I want to know, what do you think came first in the composition of the song, of the game's soundtrack? Planes of Passage or the Shield Knight motif? Do you think he made Planes of Passage first, took the snippet out of there and said, okay, I want to build this around this character, and then did that? Or do you think they specifically built Planes of Passage to be a development of Shield Knight's motif?
To be honest,
I can see it either way.
I think that Planes of Passage probably came first.
That's the sense that I get as well.
It maybe breaks my theory a little bit, but it doesn't really matter the order that things are written. You can take a melody and say, like, this is something that is, we're gonna kind of simplify it and use it as a theme for a different character, and that way we can tie references in between these pieces that are already written. So I don't think it doesn't really matter what came first, but like, it's definitely that track is. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the first thing that was written for the game, you know?
Like, it feels so full and developed and unique among the rest of the soundtrack that it feels like that might have been, like, the core pillar that the rest of everything was built around.
Yeah.
That's the sense I get. But still, even if it is the case, like, building motifs off of a song you've already made just makes sense, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't... Because it would be weird to be like, Shield Knight's theme is referencing the motif of the first level. You know, it's like that's...
Well, no, but she's stealing the motif for herself in regards to that. You are interpreting the music and its connections for yourself.
You have to consider the soundtrack rather than the order that it was composed as like a cohesive unit. And if you do that, then I think what's clearly meant to be the reference point is the Shield Knight theme.
Yeah, you know? Absolutely. Well, it's like how do I put it? My example was going to be how the Pale King motif, it starts in Hornet, and that's the first place you hear it. But it's not Hornet's motif; it is the Pale King royalty motif.
Yeah.
But then again, I just realized it also does get stated in the intro cutscene. For the poem describing the king. So that example doesn't really work.
Most basic form. Yeah.
Yeah, but you get what I mean, right? Like the motif doesn't have to be the representation of the first time you hear it. It just has to be like, constructed around that and placed properly.
As long as it has like a good payoff and it kind of like is clear like what it's trying to represent by the time you're done listening to everything that is connected to it, then sure. The order doesn't matter quite as much. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so overall, Enchantress theme, great. Planes of Passage, great. Jake Kaufmann.
Shield Knight, good. Jake Kaufmann.
Shield Knight is great.
Fantastic.
Yes, you did a great job with that. Okay, so I feel like we are close to being done with Shovel of Hope. Are there any... We talked about every area theme, didn't we, at this point? Yeah, I think we went through literally all of them in the course of that discussion.
Did we really? That's crazy.
Like I said, it just flowed naturally from one to the other. Somehow, I don't know how it happened.
Says something for the construction of the soundtrack, I guess.
Yeah,
anyway,
so
cool.
I'll go through my list of the area themes. Those are the standout tracks for me in the OST for sure. Favorite is Planes of Passage. Actually, I'll start from least favorite and move up. It's more climactic that way. Stranded Ship is my least favorite. Then the Tower Approach, which I don't think we did talk about, but
we didn't. I don't really care about
one.
that.
I don't think there's much to say about the Tower Approach. It's fine.
Unless it uses Shield Knight's theme, which would be really cool, but I don't remember.
It definitely uses the main Shovel Knight theme more, I think, like the title theme of Shovel Knight, which is fine. I don't know if it uses the Shield Knight theme, but if it does, it's very subtle.
I'm going to mute myself for a second. You talk.
Okay, I will keep talking. My list, as I'd broken through it, is the Tower Approach. Stranded Ship, then Tower Approach, the Explodatorium, third least favorite. I'm sorry, Mackenzie. The Lost City, fourth least favorite. Then Lich Yard, Iron Whale. This is getting into my top 5. Iron Whale, Pridemore Keep, Clockwork Tower, Flying Machine, and then Planes of Passage as my absolute favorite. That song is truly phenomenal, but honestly, everything probably above Tower Approach from Explodatorium upwards is some of my favorite melodic writing in any game. They really knocked it out of the park on almost all of these. So, full credit to Jake Kaufmann. Beautiful work. And now I'm going to wait for Mackenzie
we're good.
to get back.
Thank you for covering for me. I thought
no problem.
I thought I had a bit of an epiphany about like, is the Shield Knight theme the Shovel Knight theme but inverted? No, it's not.
It's not.
Tried.
No,
I tried.
It would be very fun, but
I was at my piano. I was like, I literally muted my microphone, went to like play notes, and I was like, is it? And that didn't work. And I was like, damn it.
Not really. But sort of.
Maybe like the contour of the melody is like referential in that way.
It's an inverted
2-3
contour.
notes. Yeah, but it's not. Yeah. It's not a direct. Yeah. Anyway, it's not as cool as I thought.
That's still an interesting connection. Is that you could argue that the dun 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 is an inverted contour of the dun dun dun. Yeah, it works.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, you could say something similar about any like 3-note simple melody, but those are the only two 3-note simple melodies that are really prominent in the soundtrack, so who knows?
That Could we have identified right now. There might be more.
Right. I mean, sure.
The flying machine also uses a simple 3-note melody. Is Propeller Knight the secret third member of this polycule?
Is Propeller Knight Shield Knight?
I'm gonna go with we should probably stop here at this point.
Okay. However, okay, it's the time to jump into Plague of Shadows.
Yeah, we should note right off this bat, we decided to exclude King of Cards from this discussion, mostly just because neither of us have really played it. I had Shovel Knight on Wii U back in 2014 when it came out, and I played it as they dropped the DLCs, but by the time King of Cards rolled around, I no longer had easy access to my Wii U, so I couldn't really play King of Cards. We will still be going over Plague of Shadows and Specter of Torment, though, for sure.
I did just purchase it on my Switch despite having it on my Wii U, just to avoid getting my Wii U out of storage.
I'm gonna be honest, like, listening to this soundtrack, if there's anything it has done, it's made me want to replay Shovel Knight.
Honestly,
like, that game is great, and this soundtrack is so perfect.
You can buy the whole thing, and it's not like crazy expensive. It's like 4 games for the price of 1. It's fine. But it's really good. Anyway, so haven't really talked about or played King Knight. That's fine.
So we're going to leave it out for now, but we will talk about Plague of Shadows.
Yeah.
Plague of Shadows is very interesting. I've got a couple of things to say about it.
I'm going to start off by saying that it kind of disappointed me a little bit.
The game or the soundtrack?
Well, the soundtrack, just because they didn't change the area themes.
No, they didn't, but I think back then they had a different idea of what they wanted to do for the DLCs.
Okay.
And so, like, all of the levels for Specter Knight are the exact same as the levels for Shovel Knight. You're just exploring them with a different moveset. And, like, because of that, they didn't rearrange the areas, because they're the same areas you've went through already, right?
Right.
Which I kind of get, and I also appreciate Specter Knight reorchestrating them on his, as the areas are changed to support Specter Knight's much different moveset. I don't hate it. Like I said, you can tell that this was like a lower scale DLC. They basically just made Plague Knight, gave him a couple bosses, and then threw him into the same areas and said, go. And I like it for that, honestly. I kind of like exploring these familiar areas with a new moveset.
You're going to have to remind me. So, spoiler for this DLC, I guess. When you do the Explodatorium, you go and fight Shovel Knight. Shovel Knight's the boss.
I have that as a special note. Battling the Burrower is super fun because it's a medley kind of like the main Shovel Knight theme and Plague Knight's boss battle theme.
That's what I was going to ask. Did they change that theme in particular? And I'm so glad that they did.
They added a specific song called Battling the Burrower, which is like a frantic remix of the title theme of Shovel Knight.
That's awesome.
It's beautiful. That whole fight is like a masterpiece. Maybe one of my favorite boss fights in any game, because Shovel Knight is using all the tools you used as a player character.
Yeah.
And it's the exact same scenario.
It's when you fight Plague Knight as Shovel Knight, it's the same time that Plague Knight fights Shovel Knight in his campaign.
Because these two campaigns are happening simultaneously, so it's so perfect.
It's very funny.
The battle theme is very like frantic and silly, and it's mixing Plague Knight's theme with Shovel Knight's theme as a representation of like these are the two protagonists battling it out.
Yeah.
Super cool. That fight is overall great.
I will say, just on average, though, like, sure, it's a lower scale DLC. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to make all the area themes the same, given how different the two characters are. You know?
It made sense in the context if all of them would have been just using the same areas. If all of them had been like that, enough. We wouldn't have judged it because the scale would have been lower, right? That's where I'm coming from.
Gotcha.
At least.
Yeah.
But I mean, thematically, you're right. It would have been cool to have like frantic, interesting versions of the other area themes to show like Plague Knight's insanity.
But sometimes when you remix an area theme, it doesn't go.
It doesn't go so well. So let's not let the monkey paw curl too much here. So I've got a couple other tracks that I want to highlight from the Plague Knight OST. Like we said, it's a much smaller scale DLC than the others, and much smaller scale than the base game's soundtrack. As a result, so there's not as much to say about it, but there's some stuff that I really like about Plague Knight, and overall I would say I like the Plague Knight DLC. It's like tied with Specter Knight. I love the story that they go for with this game, and they tie it in through songs you've already heard before. In the base game of Shovel Knight, there's a song called Spin the Bottle, which is just the minigame theme where you like toss the bottles around with Mona.
Right. Yeah.
And like it's a fun minigame theme. It's nothing special, but it sort of goes for like that frantic energy. It sounds kind of like minigame. You're not the only one. God, I think it's sort of made to be hard because Mona's trying to scam you out of your money to give it to Plague Knight. So it all ties together. Because yeah, the host of that minigame is like Plague Knight's right-hand woman / love interest, who you'll learn later. And I love that minigame theme later on. There's a character in Shovel Knight called the Troupple King. I don't know if the audience has heard of this, if they haven't played it. He's a big trout who's also an apple. Don't worry, it makes just as much sense in context. And when you meet him as Shovel Knight, he does like a whole dance number and then gives you some healing items, right? I don't know, it's just like a quirky, random moment, but it's fun.
I forgot the tango.
In Plague Knight's version, he goes to the Troupple King specifically to ask if the Troupple King will teach Plague Knight how to dance because he wants to impress Mona. And so yeah, they go into this whole tango number with this massive apple fish for no reason, and that is a remix of the Spin the Bottle minigame.
Really? Oh my god. That's crazy.
And they do it so, because that's already like, it's in like a tango sort of key. It's just like frantic minigame music, right? But they reorchestrate, they
that's
remix
really
it
funny.
as like a full tango. It's so good.
Do you think the base game of Shovel Knight was made with any intention of making DLC? Probably not.
Yes,
really?
it was for sure because they kickstarted it and those were stretch goals. So they knew that they would be doing that. I just don't think they had an idea of how much they would do. So
okay.
But I mean, I don't know if they made the Mona Spin the Bottle minigame theme with the intention of making it into a tango. If they did, then it was brilliant, the way that they managed to do it.
I guess it depends on like when it was developed in comparison to the other one.
Even if they didn't plan it, they executed it super well. Yeah. So, and like overall, I just want to say I love the story of Plague Knight's campaign. Like the love story between him and Mona is actually really sweet. Like once you go to the Troupple King and he teaches you how to dance with this tango number, Plague Knight is then able to dance by crouching. You can just dance whenever you want.
I forgot about that. Yeah,
that's so good. Except he can't do it in front of Mona because he's too shy. He'll just like shuffle his feet when you go for the input. It's so good. And like, I don't know, I really like how in that soundtrack for Plague of Shadows, they mix those like crazy mad scientist feeling sounds, and then like the classic waltzes and tango music, like that works really, really well for the unique tracks, I feel like. And it's
I think it would be boring if they just went for like full swing like Mad Scientist. I mean, sure, like it makes sense, but I think what they did was great.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have as many standout tracks. Like those are some of the only ones that I had.
I mean, Plague of Shadows doesn't have a lot of tracks to begin with.
In general, yeah. Like the final boss is okay, but it's not a standout. Shovel Knight's strength isn't in its boss music, I think.
However, the next DLC, Specter of Torment,
got a little more wild with it.
Oh boy, I would say most of the area themes, I almost want to say they were improved upon. I actually
have the exact opposite opinion.
Really? Okay.
I think almost every area theme is a downgrade.
Really?
Personally.
I mean, Pridemore Keep,
sure. Pridemore Keep is, an abomination and an eldritch monstrosity we will cleanse from this planet, but we're not talking about that. We've gotten through that already.
Okay.
We will never have it play in our podcasts ever again, if God is my witness.
It's playing
right now. No, it's not. Cut it right now. We're talking about Specter Knight. Every area theme is a downgrade, but at least it's a thematic downgrade, so I'm not like opposed to it. They're usually like faster with more exciting percussion, and that doesn't always jive for me.
Sure.
But I do have a couple exceptions. Do you want to go through the ones that you'd like first?
I bet one of your exceptions is Lost City, and I'll talk about it too.
It is exactly one of my exceptions.
But I would say what I have listed as my favorite remix is Lich Yard, actually, which is
really
I didn't have a lot of time to play through this one. In fact, I didn't. I just kind of looked through some of the tracks. I was like, oh, these are fun little remixes. But yeah, they definitely, the melodies are mostly reused, but I think the general kind of philosophy for how they remixed was they keep the melodies more or less intact and then change what surrounds them. So they changed the percussion, they changed the harmonic,
the tempo
sometimes, but the harmonic speed as well. So Lich Knight notably is just like a lot of added like bass and percussion. Lich Yard,
we get what you mean.
But
it's okay. I don't hate it. It's a downgrade, but it's a small one, and like you're going for this thematic for Specter Knight already, so going deeper for Lich Yard, whatever.
What it does for each of them is it gives them a bit of a more cinematic spin.
Yeah, which sometimes works. and sometimes doesn't for me. Like,
sure.
I kind of like Lich Yard for it being, like we said, it's a little bit more low-key for a graveyard. It's like chilling out and jamming, but it's not, it's not going for a super spooky or cinematic or dramatic tone. It's just sort of going for a cool, still moderately spooky, but that's sort of on the back burner. When you remix it for Specter Knight, it does get much more cinematic.
Yeah.
And I'm not as much of a fan of that.
What I will say about the Lost City one is that
I think the Lost City gets its strength because of that exact factor.
What stands out for me in this one is actually the intro again. And that's because of the harmonic material being not changed, but extended. So at the very beginning of the Lost City theme in the base game in Shovel Knight, it goes with this kind of like minor 1, flat 6, flat 7, 1, minor 1. So it's a very cinematic, very video gamey kind of like idea.
But they drop away from that as the song goes on.
They do. But what they do in the remix in this opening is they keep the melodies the same, so it's like still the bum 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 bum. That's still happening, but the harmony doubles in length. So you hold onto the one chord for a lot longer, and then you just have this massive switch to the flat 6, and it's so like kind of devastating. It's very dramatic, yeah. And then it moves
That's exactly
up to
what
flat
I had in my
7.
notes.
Yeah, it's very,
I wasn't
it's
able
very
to.
Cool.
Yeah, it super is. I wasn't able to describe it, nail down exactly why it worked, but what I had in my notes was like, it loses some of like that driving feeling of the original, but in exchange, it gets way more dramatic chords to give it emotion that it didn't have before, to give it like resolutions, you know what I mean?
What I think about is fantastic about it is that the chords aren't different; they're just put in different places to do different things.
The fact that is super cool. It makes me like it even more than I did before.
I think it's fantastic. I have it listed as my favorite remix on here.
I think that's what I would say about it, is like most of these songs that are arranged for Specter Knight are more dramatic, and sometimes that works really well with Lost City, but sometimes I don't like it quite as much.
Well, I think it makes sense thematically, right? You got to think about who you're playing
as. Yes, you're playing as the edgy guy who cares about stuff more, unlike Shovel Knight who's just going through and exploring, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to mesh with the style that they already had established, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I did have a couple other ones on there that I do still like, despite that, though. Like I said, it's hit or miss for me, but there are still hits. I really love what they did with Flying Machine. I think the Flying Machine version in Specter Knight is, again, they basically just take the same core song, but they just amp up the drama, and in this case, like, the Flying Machine was already going for like a very beautiful up in the sky sort of vibe, right? And in this one they go all out with it, with the resolutions in particular. They really crank the beauty up in that.
I can't seem to bring it to mind right now, but
I mean, they changed the timings of each hit. The chords are more dramatic, the resolutions are more full. It's less whimsical fun, like you're up in the sky, which the original had some of, and it's way more soulful. But
correct me if I'm wrong. The melodies are all kind of intact, right? Like they don't really change how it's presented.
But they do change. They change the timing of the melody in.
They mess with the rhythm.
Flying Machine. Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay.
Which I think works super, super well for it. And it still remains catchy, I think. Like, they didn't change the driving tone of the original. That's still retained really, really well. So it still feels catchy. You're still, like, snapping your fingers along with it, but it really cranks the beauty up. I'm a big fan of that. That was my favorite change they made in Specter Knight, I think. And I already had the Flying Machine as my second favorite song. So the fact that they improved it is remarkable.
Yeah. Okay, so you do consider that one an improvement on the base game?
Yes.
Okay.
I do, even if it's just a small one, because I love Flying Machine already, but the fact that they improved on it at all is really impressive.
Yeah, I would say the curve is really weird with the Specter Knight remixes, because some of them are improvements, some of them definitely are downgrades.
Yeah. Do you have like a note of what you think would be a notable downgrade? I have one.
I mean,
obviously,
I wonder if
you agree with it.
Keep. Well,
no, we're not talking about that. Like I said, we're keeping it out of this discussion.
I'll be honest, I can't think of any off the top of my head.
For me, Plains of Passage is a big downgrade in Specter Knight.
Okay.
Like they really lower the tempo and like the exciting feel of it, which like that's the whole point of the song, my guy. You know what I mean? Like when you take the energy out of Plains of Passage, you are removing the soul of the song, and it is still good. I'm not gonna damn any of the arrangements they made for this, even if I don't like them, and even if they are big downgrades, because they're thematically appropriate for Specter Knight. So I understand always why they're doing what they're doing, but it super doesn't work for Plains of Passage.
I think Plains of Passage could have had a total revamp if only because it's not Shovel Knight going through there to say Shield Knight.
Exactly. Yeah, the Shield Knight motif doesn't matter for Specter Knight. Like, Specter Knight doesn't even like Shield Knight, doesn't even care about Shield Knight at all.
Yeah.
You don't need that motif there anymore. It's because this is the generic starting zone, right? So it would make more sense to have a new starting song for Specter Knight.
I totally agree. I think that would have been a better way to go about it. God,
and I know we're just like, no, I don't want to smack talk. Like we've been saying,
the soundtrack's incredible.
Overall is truly great. But we gotta see where they could have toned stuff up, done stuff a little differently.
As a general rule of thumb, if we're talking about a soundtrack as a full episode on this podcast, we don't think it's a bad soundtrack. We think it's a really good soundtrack. Unless in the future we do like a hit piece or something. But I don't think we're going to.
I see no reason why we ever would do that. It's sort of just mean.
That's not fun.
So yeah, don't take this as an indictment of the Specter Knight soundtrack. Like I said, a lot of them are downgrades, but they're still putting a lot of effort in and remixing them to be thematically appropriate, which I can always appreciate.
So yeah, what's your take on Shovel Knight's soundtrack as a whole?
As a whole? It is, to me, as a soundtrack, exactly like how Shovel Knight is as a game. It's a landmark achievement of the modern indie scene, right? Like it defines what an indie retro soundtrack should be going for, much like the game defines what a retro indie platformer should be going for, and it has. So I am beyond impressed with the soundtrack to Shovel Knight.
I was almost gonna say it walked so that like other indie games could run, but like it didn't walk. It ran itself.
It sprinted so other games could try to catch up. Mega Man walked so this could run.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
The fact that they brought the Mega Man composer on to compose one of the songs, and it's my fourth favorite, I think that says enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah, fair enough. That's true. Just like as a standalone composer, he did a fantastic job.
Yeah, like claps for Jake Kaufmann, for sure. He like absolutely nailed it. This was his breakout performance, and well-deserved. Beyond well-deserved.
So I am going to snag the easier one for if you liked this, you should listen to, and say Mega Man 2. I think you should listen to that soundtrack. Because I think it's just the spiritual precursor to this one. A lot of just chiptune. But Mega Man 2 itself was pretty innovative, if you think about it. Like compared to like other NES tracks that were happening. Mega Man really kind of flipped the script and started these just energetic,
the elaborate
area
melodies,
tracks, and it's very clearly like a spiritual precursor to Shovel Knight.
Like we've been saying, the Shovel Knight soundtrack is just full of super elaborate, developed melodic composing, and like Mega Man was maybe the first retro game to really go hard on that.
Yeah, you can see a lot of the same
very
ideas.
Distinct melody.
That's the thing. The melodic writing is very clearly taken. He took notes from the Mega Man soundtrack. Like those melodies are all very, very well written, and they kind of have to be on the NES because you don't have as much room for a song.
Yeah, you don't have much else, and that's what makes it even more painful.
But each one is just, Anyway.
Yeah. What I'll say, this is going to be less of a if you liked this soundtrack, listen to this, but to get like some context historically of the sort of place indie games were when this game came out, I'm going to recommend the Fez soundtrack, which was by Disasterpiece. It's a different vibe, but like if you want to get a full picture of what indie games were like at this time, because this was when like the very first ones had come out and sort of shown that you can do indie stuff, but this is when people were trying to figure out what different styles they could all go for in this space, and Fez really shows like you can go more abstract, you can go more undefined in the indie pixel art space. You don't have to go, like, Shovel Knight is taking the indie pixel art platformer and really going, like, traditional with it, but just going above and beyond. Whereas Fez is really trying to subvert and create an atmosphere. So if that's more what you're looking for, in the same sort of time period and gaming landscape, I would recommend giving Fez a listen. That soundtrack, Disasterpiece as a whole, is a phenomenal artist.
For sure. I haven't played any of the games that he worked on, but man, I know his music. It's so good.
I've played Fez and Hyper Light Drifter, but I haven't played anything else.
He does a great job of just ambient writing. We could do an episode on Disasterpiece. That'd be fun.
I don't think we could do a whole episode on Hyper Light Drifter or Fez,
but if we combine his work and talk about kind of that we'll talk about that
for the future.
Composer special.
Definitely, we'll do a couple composer specials, I'm sure. Okay, I think that's it for Shovel Knight. We've gotten our thoughts out of the way. Overall, great game. We wouldn't be talking about it here if it wasn't. So yeah.
So have you been playing any games lately, Jack?
Any games that I've been playing more roguelikes lately, just like if I have some time to slip in and I don't have anything else going on. Lately I've been playing more Hades, and part of that is because Hades 2 is coming out right away. Not to date this episode, but
is it coming out soon?
Not soon, but within the year it'll be out. And Hades is it almost feels wrong to shout out Hades here, because to shout out Hades we would need to shout out all of Supergiant. Their repertoire is legendary.
Absolutely.
Like, if you were to take 4 games that any game company has made and just collect them as a soundtrack, there would be few contenders as strong as Supergiant's library. And Hades is maybe my least favorite of all of them.
Soundtrack
and for
wise,
that, soundtrack wise, game wise, it is among my favorites. Well, to say it's among my favorite 4 doesn't really mean anything, but still, like, the Hades soundtrack is great. It's got phenomenal vocals, the guitar and layering of it all, like how it's dynamic music as well, so parts will fade in and out depending on what's going on. They really put a lot of effort into it, and it is still probably my least favorite of the 4 soundtracks. So like, Hades, it's so good, but it also does make me want to push the Supergiant episode that we are inevitably going to do.
Supergiant episode coming in the future at some point, folks.
Within a year. I'm locking that in.
Yeah,
within
in 2023, I'm sure it'll happen. I just got to play Transistor.
I've only gotten halfway through Transistor, but it's maybe my favorite of the soundtracks. So, yeah. Anyway.
All right, well...
What have you been playing lately, Mackenzie? Listening to?
I've been playing Hollow Knight. I know.
Have you really been replaying Hollow Knight?
Genuinely, yeah. I didn't play it before we did the episode, but as I've been editing it, I was like, I should play this a little bit, so I did. And now I got up to the City of Tears, and I'm just vibing with it. And I just
do you understand what I was talking about when I said that, like, the way that they introduced the City of Tears gradually throughout that, like, it's masterful.
It's very, very well done. In a way that it couldn't really be captured on the soundtrack. So I wish I had played it before I talked about it on the episode, but I understand what you mean, for sure.
Yeah, I don't blame them for doing the soundtrack the way they did, but just like the emotion they capture when combined with the aesthetics of the game in particular work unbelievably well.
Yeah.
Anything else about Hollow Knight that you've noticed?
I'm nothing substantial more than what we talked about on the episode, other than that it's a fantastic soundtrack and it does so well evoking what's happening in the gameplay. It's great.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, folks, we're going to kind of have to wrap it up, though, because we are doing another episode today. Haha. So
of course we are. This will be a trend for a little while. Next time on Stages of Sound, we are going to be doing an episode on the Mario Kart series.
Yeah.
Which might be a bit of a weird pick, but I think Mackenzie and I both really enjoy the Mario Kart soundtrack, right?
It's just going to be a fun, whimsical time.
Yeah, if you want to come hear how we think about racing music in general and Mario Kart in particular, give it a listen.
Yeah.
In a week.
All right. Is it outro time?
It's outro time. Okay. All right, audience. Wait, do we want to try doing the outro like synchronized, like you and me together? Kind of like how there's different campaigns in Shovel Knight?
We should probably plug our Spotify first. Hey guys, we're Stages of Sound on Spotify and on YouTube and on
Apple Music
and on Amazon Music. And on iHeartRadio, and on several other things that I can't think of. If you listen to podcasts, we're probably there. Just find Stages of Sound and listen to us there.
And if you guys are listening to us on a platform that we're not on, please do let us know so we can be on there, if you don't mind.
Also, if you
anyway,
if you have a friend, do you have friends, Jack?
Not that I can think of. Sorry.
Well, okay. For those of you who can't relate to Jack and you do have friends, and you think those friends like game music and would be down to listen to people ramble about game music,
we're going to be doing that.
Tell them about the podcast, man. They might need a few hours to kill. Listen to us talk about whatever.
Game music.
Yeah.
Are you painting a house tomorrow? Is a friend painting a house tomorrow? Has this ever happened to you? Oh, gosh. I got this whole house to paint, and I don't have anything to listen to while I do it. Well, have I got the solution for you? For only 000, you too can listen to us talk about video game music for a whole hour.
That's right, folks. You heard it here. You heard it here first. Stages of Sound, the premier house painting podcast. All right.
Lock it in. That's our tagline from now on. Okay, everybody, exit soundstage.
Exit soundstage. Oh, we didn't do it at the same time.
In sync. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Exit soundstage right. 3, 2, 1.
Exit sound stage right.
And that's
all right. Yeah, we need
Perfect.
to.
All right.